Hello everyone, my name is Andres Gauna and my presentation is titled Creative Freedom over Moral Responsibility in Video Game Development. Video games have evolved from simple pixels into complex works of art that allow the shaping of emotion and thought. Here we see how far video games have come from pixel games like Pac-Man and games like Grand Theft Auto 5. As the work matures, developers face an ethical dilemma on how to balance creative vision with moral responsibility. This presentation argues that while games can influence players' sense of right and wrong, developers should prioritize creative freedom over moral instructions, as video games are an art with potential moral influence. The slides ahead will go over the ethical arguments on both sides, how developers should prioritize creative freedom while maintaining ethical awareness, and the conclusion that moral interpretation at the end of the day belongs to players and parents, not developers. I will also go over how other countries handle the ethical video game problems. Background and significance. Game developers are the architects of interactive worlds, shaping stories and mechanics, and creating characters that reflect a human condition. They can also be used as moral guides through their work. As Bogus explains, games are expressive systems designed to be experienced and explored. They don't just tell stories, they invite judgment, reflection, and participation. Neely adds that designers cannot ethically ignore the player's perspective, yet imposing internal moral standards would weaken the player's ability to make ethical decisions independently. It's for this reason that creative freedom isn't just a right, it's necessary for moral engagement through interaction. Here we have two video games that are very involved with guiding player morals. They both have very beautiful stories and are quite expressive in storytelling and player interaction. As video games become more realistic and emotionally deep, it creates concerns for stronger ethical debates. Developers are like filmmakers and journalists in the sense that they can be viewed as social influencers. And this goes to show how much ethical responsibility they can hold. Neely points out that games are most powerful when players exercise moral agency through their own actions. This shows that moral interpretation should be up to the player and not the developer. Here we have some controversial content causing awareness called No Russian Mission from a game called Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. So, the media often blames violent games for aggressive behavior. Through evidence is this game, and this illustrates how artistic expression and controversy can arise. In this mission, the player must go undercover to gain trust of a Russian terrorist, and in doing so is involved of a mass shooting, killing innocent people. The act is not mandatory and can be skipped. However, it still goes to show how much controversy of violence in video games can corrupt players. Ethical debates also extend to monetization, like loot boxes, gacha systems, and manipulative user interfaces that can exploit gambling addicts and younger audiences, which Hodent also criticizes for targeting vulnerable audiences. In terms of global differences, regional policies like Europe's censorship laws versus the US free speech defense shows how ethics in gaming can vary globally and can goes to show why having a universal standard moral rule is unrealistic. So global differences continued. The ethics of game design vary widely by culture and policy. In the United States, the ESRB system provides guidance and leaves creative control to studios. The First Amendment also protects expression. In Germany, laws restrict violent or extremist imagery. For example, Wolfenstein 2, a video game, was altered to remove Nazi symbolism before release, as you can see in the picture. Japan, on the other hand, approaches morality through empathy and symbolism rather than punishment. As Sanderson notes, Japanese narrative games promote moral reflection through character empathy, not explicit judgment. These regional contrasts show that while ethical standards differ, protecting artistic uniqueness within each culture creates innovation. Ethical awareness should guide, not restrict, creative freedom. Games thrive when they explore controversial and morally complex experiences. Creative freedom also creates diversity. Developers from underrepresented backgrounds use interactive storytelling to challenge the norm, and censoring them because of ethics would silence voices and different perspectives. Transparency. Transparency is what makes a work ethical, not censorship. It protects freedom and safety. Sanderson shows that moral engagement arises when players reflect on their own decisions, not when content is censored. And Primi found that adolescent exposure to loot boxes correlate with gambling behavior, proving why responsible practices are the true solution and not artistic restriction. So here are some ethical theories. Here we have utilitarianism, which maximizes enjoyment and minimizes harm through balanced design. Deontology, which is when developers have a duty to be honest and transparent. Virtue ethics, which is when creators should act with integrity and empathy, creating meaningful experiences. When combined, these perspectives argue for responsible freedom and not censorship. It preaches the idea that developers can act ethically while still being creative innovators. In terms of a counterargument, critics claim that without moral oversight, games may normalize violence or reinforce bias. They argue that developers must be held accountable for social harm. However, such control often overlooks player agency. Rather than restricting creative work, society can rely on content ratings, education, and open dialogue. So the counter here is that player agency is key. To have the player interact more through the game and interact morally, it creates the solution that um, it creates the solution of the whole ethical debate that developers should be ethically responsible. In conclusion, as video games gain cultural recognition, developers face growing ethical arguments. Games can shape morality, but not preach it. Developers should remain transparent without sensitive content and monetization, but not be forced to moralize. They should create with freedom and design responsibly. The interpretive power of games lies in the player's hands. Cultural diversity also ensures that no single ethical standard can define what is right for all. In the end, video games should embrace moral awareness without losing artistic freedom, because freedom and awareness creates beautiful and meaningful art. Thank you. Here are my references.